Welcome back, everybody. This is Coffee with Coaches. I'm Coach Reese, here with Coach Loretta. We have Coach Madeline Harms on the podcast today. We're super excited to talk with her. She's got a bunch of experience racing, and just in the past year alone, she raced about 8 times. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's about 8, right?
Probably about right, yeah.
So got a ton of experience from, 5Ks and 10Ks on up to 50 miles and 100 miles and in timed events and whatnot. So we're really excited to interview you just about like your wealth of experience and knowledge in the space. So welcome, Madeline. Welcome, Coach Loretta.
Hey.
Thank you.
Dive into your day job. So you were just telling us before we went on air that you're a professor with U of M Duluth.
Oh, you cut off there a little bit, Reese.
They did.
Sorry, can you hear me?
I can only hear the very beginning of each thing you say.
Same.
Oh. Sorry about that. Can you still hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we're really excited to talk with you. And I just wanted to know more about your daytime profession. You were telling us that you're a professor with University of Minnesota, Duluth. And I'm super interested to know what you do for a day job.
So like you mentioned, I'm a professor at, we call it UMD, not to be confused with the one in Maryland. I've been working at U of M Duluth for just over a year now, almost a year and a half. Before that, I was a professor at a few other places around the Twin Cities, I do a lot of different things for my day job. No day is the same. Every day presents a new challenge. So I have kind of my teaching schedule. So I teach a few classes every semester, and then I also supervise both graduate students, and we have a master's program in psychology. I think, psychology is the subject I teach. That's probably good to know. And I specialize in developmental psychology, so studying how children develop cognitively and emotionally, and how their early background affects later types of decision making. I teach classes, I supervise research that graduate students and undergraduate students are conducting, and I also do my own research, and I have several different projects going on at any given time. So it's a pretty busy job. It definitely is never boring and keeps me on my toes every day. And sometimes it ends up being long hours and, working on the weekends and working at night and stuff. So it's interesting though. And I love, working with the students and helping them, achieve things that they've been working for. So
That's awesome. That's what I think is so cool about our coaching staff, that we all have such unique backgrounds. It's fun to get to know people and what they do besides their love for running. So but another thing I want to mention is you're also part of the Trail Sisters in Duluth. Is that right? Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually I started the Duluth chapter of Trail Sisters. When I moved here, like I'd known, about Trail Sisters for a long time, and I noticed there wasn't a group in Duluth yet. So I, just kind of got that going, and we're small but mighty. Actually, we have a lot of people on Facebook, and then a small number will come to the actual runs. We have, a weekly Thursday night run that we kind of rotate the location throughout the year. And it's been a fun way for me to meet people who are runners too. And
right, that's really cool.
And then
you and Coach Shannon are working on putting together an Ornery Mule racing meeting night too. So
we are. We're hoping to start that next month, actually.
So. Nice. And that's going to be Mondays?
Yeah, I think Mondays.
Okay. Yeah. So for listeners, we'll be getting that out on our pages so people can join Coach Madeline and Coach Shannon at the weekly Monday events near Duluth. So
yeah.
That's fantastic. I'm kind of getting this whole like holistic picture of like, you're not only like a professor and a teacher and an educator, but you're a people connector, and you're like having this sense of community is important to you. And I think like, doing that, being a mother, like all of these things, like wrapping in and creating the coach that you are, I think it's a very symbiotic relationship of like, you don't have like profession and then coaching, and then, you know, like you don't wear these different hats, but you kind of live this life that's kind of like shaped around all of your passions. So I think that's really awesome. I can only imagine that that kind of melds into like you as a coach. So can you kind of share a little bit about like your coaching experience, likes, what you like about working with athletes?
Yeah. So far, most of my coaching experience has been through kind of in-person programs. So I was a number of years ago, I was a marathon training group leader with Running Room back in when I lived in Minneapolis, when I was in graduate school there, actually. So I led the marathon training group and ran with people on their workouts and long runs and stuff that were training for I can't remember which marathon it was, but yeah, grandma's or Twin Cities or something. And so that was a lot of fun. And I've also coached kids through Girls on the Run. So I've done a few seasons with them. And yeah, I just really enjoyed those experiences so much, and kind of working with people as individuals and getting to know them and helping them achieve their goals. So I figured I'd try to expand that a little bit and get into some online coaching too in this, world we live in, where we can be connected. We don't have to be physically near each other to be connected in that way necessarily. So and I've also had I'm currently self-coached, but I've had online running coaches in the past that have been really helpful, and I've learned a lot from them in terms of how to put together a program, and that's unique to individual needs and circumstances that pop up. And so yeah, I'm really, really excited to start kind of expanding my coaching experience with Ornery and Mule.
Nice. And I thought it was kind of fitting today. So I got up and I was running a little bit late because I was doing some coaching stuff and, wanted to get in a long run. And I'm like, well, this is a perfect example of, I think, how you fit in some things with your daily life with having a child, and also, for coaching athletes. So I got up, I only had a small fraction of time. Actually, Reese texted me to say he was just had finished his run, and I'm like, I'm still on the trail and I'm just like trying to squeak in a little bit more. I actually did a few out and backs and passed this lady a few times in her dog, and I finally apologized. I'm like, sorry, I'm just squeaking in a little bit more mileage, but I'm afraid to get too far out, because I knew I needed to get back for the podcast today. But, so for me, my solution is I was going to squeak in what I could this morning, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a double. So my long run isn't all going to be at once today. I'm working with my schedule what I can. Tomorrow I'll be leaving for Javelina. I'm going to be crewing and pacing there. So I wanted to get in my long run, or I'm going to be crewing, not pacing. So I wanted to get in my long run before I left. So, sometimes we have to, when we have busy schedules, be flexible about our training. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like how that works for you and how you would work with an athlete to make that happen?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, again, like every day is different, as I mentioned before. So it's, some days I will run. Luckily, my daughter sleeps in pretty well. Like she'll reliably sleep in till like 8 o'clock if we let her. So sometimes I can get my run in the morning before she wakes up, especially on weekdays and before getting her to daycare and everything. Sometimes I like to drop her off at daycare. If I don't have a super early morning class, I can run after I drop her off at daycare, because there's kind of a nice path by there to run on. But yeah, like fitting it in, it's just kind of like knowing, okay, what's my schedule gonna be like, this week? When can I fit the runs in? When can I do the long runs? Also stroller runs can sometimes be a great option. So it's a little bit of an extra upper body workout for sure. And you're going to go at a slower pace, but kind of good for ultra training, right? Where you're going to be going through difficult circumstances anyway. So I do that sometimes as well. And kind of fitting it in wherever it works out. It's kind of like doing a puzzle, I guess. And the same, I approach, prescribing things for athletes the same way. Like I'm not just going to like write a program, without knowing what your life looks like and, what your day-to-day looks like, or some days like a little more relaxed at work. We could maybe do a more running that day, or a longer run, or a workout, and other days are a little more stressful. So we just have that be, an easier, shorter running day. So yeah, it's going to be different for every person. And yeah, that's a lot of the fun of it, is just kind of putting together that puzzle and figuring in where things can work.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
I love the idea of splitting. I haven't done a ton of that, like splitting up my long run, but I know other people have, and it seems to work fine, right? Just make it into a double.
Yep. So I love that because, I just actually took back a client that was with me, and then she had a baby. And so she had to take some, she had the baby and recover and everything. And now she came back, and now she has two little ones. I think her older one would be like around 4 and a baby. And then her husband's a farmer. So she's like, wow, I can really do 100. I'm like, well, if you want to, we definitely can be creative with you, because plus she works full time, creative with you to make it work. And of course, that being a farmer adds another component, because now we have to work around races that's around, works around high time for farming season, right?
Yeah.
Those pieces out. So I like that challenge too, of trying to figure out, make it work, and make people, or help people reach their dreams when they think that maybe it's impossible because of their schedule.
Yeah, totally. And I do think you have to like keep your background in mind a little bit, like what's your life like, when are things more high stress, and when are they like at work, or when are the more high stress times, when are the lower stress times. And I think it is good to kind of like maybe pick races that are in, like, if you can, like lower stress times at work, if you know when those are going to be. So I know, like for me, summer is a lot more low key, because I'll usually teach an online class during the summer, but I'm not teaching in-person classes. I'm not expected to like be on campus. And so it's more relaxed, and I can get more training, and also better racing in during the summer, where I tend to do better races in the summer.
Yeah. And that's a good point. I like to do that with athletes, thinking about, I have another athlete that's a single mom. She has, 4 children, and they're in, getting older, getting into, sports and stuff. So you have to think about their schedule too, to try to figure out like when would work for a race. Cause it's not practical if they're in high soccer season, maybe to get all your training in, or whatever. So yeah, I think that's a really good strategy that you're thinking about, those schedules. That's, I think, the beauty of not using a plan from a magazine or a book, because with this, we have the human component in there, right? And can understand how to make a training plan work into your life, not just what it looks like on paper that looks all nice and pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
Along with that too, it's nice to have somebody that give you reassurance if something goes awry, like, oh, sorry, I get a lot of athletes that say, sorry, I missed this workout or whatever. And it's like, thought we can restructure it later in the week, or like, hey, if you had to sleep in because you were working till 3 o'clock in the morning, like, don't even, like, your body needs recovery more. But if you're just looking at a plan and all you see is, oh, I missed that workout, like, back, it can be somewhat demoralizing. So sometimes, like, people just need that. Hey, like, it's all good. Like, you missed a workout, but that doesn't mean that your training's upside down. And I totally
definitely
like looking at somebody's life in total, because like I was just talking with an athlete last night, and we were talking about increasing his mileage, and it's like, well, this is about how long it takes you to run X mileage. If we want to build up to this mileage, you're going to have a 7-hour commitment instead of a 6-hour commitment, or an 8-hour commitment a week. Is that realistic? Find time with your family. He's got 2 young ones and a wife, and it's so funny because his wife was in the background like, leave time for us,
Yeah.
Step on any, but like, like, you keep this idea in mind of like, hey, like, yeah, we all want to reach our goals, we all want to like strive for big things, but also to like life, family, friends, obligations, work, like it's all got to symbiotically coexist.
Yeah, that's so important. And also just to, be okay. And a coach can come in here too. It's like, you don't have to, maybe if you have a lot of other life things going on and life stress, like you probably shouldn't try to be doing like what, pro athletes are doing, like either in terms of, back-to-back races, or your training mileage, or even the amount of time you spend training. Like it's going to be lower, and that's okay. Because if you, try to train 20 hours a week when you're also, working 50 hours a week and you have kids, like that's probably not, you're probably going to get overtrained, and that's not going to be good for you. Whereas, someone that just works part-time with no kids can totally do that.
Right. I agree. And I like that question too, Reese, is like talking with athletes, like, okay, I have this conversation a lot when I have new athletes, like how many hours in the week can you dedicate to your goal? Because I think consistency is key. And if you think you can do 6 hours, great. But if you think you can do 6 and you can really only do 4, let's be honest, right? Because we have to figure out, and you work with the time that we have versus like this high hope of I want to do everything. Because sometimes I get that, when people first get started, they're super excited and they want to do it all, right? And they really don't have time for it all. And so then it starts slipping, and then they start feeling bad, like reset and saying, I'm sorry, I missed this workout. I'm sorry, and it's like, don't tell me you're sorry. It's okay. That's what happens, and we'll figure it out, but we want it to match you, not just, this is what, these are the hours you're going to do,
Right. Yeah. It's like, well, let's go back to the drawing board and see. It's like, all right, this was too much, and that's fine. We'll, figure out a plan that works better for you.
Yep. I think so too, for sure.
All right, Coach Madeline, let's get a little bit into like let's just look at your 2023 season. Like I'm just you were running 10Ks, and then it looks like you ran a 4-hour race, and then a 50K, and then a 33K out in Colorado. Like you are, and I just think it's so interesting how, you're able to craft a program and craft some good training around such vastly different rate or distances, I suppose. And really too, when we look at the difference of like a 5K or a 10K versus a 50K versus a 50 miler, like they're kind of different sports almost. So they require different demands. Like, how do you structure your training so that way, like, you're ready for, the fast stuff, you're ready for the long stuff? Like, what does your paradigm look like?
Yeah. That's a good question. So, I mean, in some ways I kind of like go with the flow a little bit, life circumstances and all that. I think and sometimes I like to pick races, like the 50K I did in Arizona was during my spring break. So that worked out well to kind of take a family vacation, and that was super fun. And the 33K, I went out to visit my sibling in Colorado there. So nice excuse to get out there. So my season this year was structured around, I was actually originally signed up for Bighorn 100, but there were some family circumstances that prevented me from making it there. But you'll see, like, those were the races I did kind of going up to that. The 50K and the 33K were supposed to be kind of build up for that. They had a lot of vert and elevation and stuff. So they were kind of like not my A races, even though I did pretty well at them, which is also sort of a paradox with me. Like, I often do better at my like B races than I do at my A races, maybe because I put too much pressure on myself. The 4-hour, the 50K, we're all kind of like building off each other to get up to that. And I still had a lot of fun with those build-up races. They were great times, so no regrets there. I just kind of for 100-mile, like, I like to get at least a couple 50Ks in usually before that, and just like, test out my gear and, my fueling plan and all that stuff. Maybe a 50-mile. So I did once I was signed up for Hennepin later, I did the Voyager 50-mile this summer, which is very different terrain than Hennepin. It's a lot more hilly and technical, but, still a good experience of getting the time on my feet and, fueling and hydrating for a pretty long time. And so that, so I just kind of, it's also just part of the puzzle, like looking. So I like to race a lot. And so I like to do those build-up races. Other people might just want to like go out and do 30 miles on their own, which is totally cool too. But I just enjoy doing it in a race experience more. And yeah, so it's just kind of like, what's the next step? Like, is this some races I taper for, some races I don't really, and just run through them just depending on where they fit in the plan. Are they an A race, a B race, a C race, that sort of thing.
I like that. That's a lot how I will program athletes who like to race a lot.
Mhm.
I'm just the opposite. I'm not somebody that likes to race a lot. I'd rather just go out and run it on a long run, but I do have
Yeah.
athletes are the same. They want to race a lot. So, it is a little bit more challenging sometimes to kind of put those puzzle pieces together to make them work into a build. So it makes sense rather than really ramping miles up to get in a race that you really don't need to have that kind of miles that early in the season for your A goal, but you do to be able to complete a goal, a race that's coming up sooner. So
yeah.
How about you, Reese? Do you have that situation that you dealt with?
Yeah. So, personally, if I have a race on the calendar, like I want to hit it hard, so like I tend to shy away from like racing a ton. Now, with that being said, and Coach Madeline, I'm interested to get your opinion on your Hennepin 100. Like I ended up getting COVID about like a week and a half ago, and I, basically had a DNS at like one of two of my races for this fall. So now I have 5 months, and I'm like, shit, I'm really just craving like the competitive atmosphere, the race start and finish. Like I want to go hard with my friends. Like I want to be chomping at the bit. And I'm like, man, I haven't raced it. So now me thinking about my next year, I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, like I want to race more just because there's going to be times where you're not like on the ball. There's going to be times where sickness comes into play or other factors.
Yeah.
So I do like that, like you're giving yourself more time to like be in the arena. And therefore I'd imagine that it helps you practice your race day plan. And of course, like, us as coaches like to always tell people like, we got to be practicing your plan. We got to be practicing your, I do suppose it's the most specific way to be practicing your plan. But, I have a couple athletes that are like, like if I'm on the starting line, I just can't help myself. Like I want to go hard. And it's like, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't do like a hard 50-mile 3 weeks before your 100-mile race, They can take it as like a long training run, and they're positive that they're just going to be able to go out there and have fun and not feel like they're like, on the ball the entire time. Then it's like, absolutely, let's program those B and those C races because it'll get you in the ring a little bit more. The reason I brought up your Hennepin 100 is because just a little teaser for later on in the show, but it sounds like you didn't have too great of a day there. And I consider like a DNF at a distance, kind of like a DNS, because I just feel like, I put in all this training for, a 50-mile race that I didn't end up racing. And now you're kind of left with this like empty feeling, like I would imagine it's post-mortem after a race that goes south,
Yeah. I mean, so I would consider it, like, for me personally, a better experience, or at least a more informative experience than a DNS would have been. So I still like, so we went out there, and I just basically, I kind of got like a little cold or something the day before. This happens when you have a child in daycare. And I was also like having some weird allergies like a couple days before, like on our drive up. So there's just like some weird stuff going on. But yeah, I showed up and to the start and felt pretty good for the first 20 miles or so, and had a good time. And then I started, not feeling so good and not being able to really keep any nutrition down. So hoped that mostly walked the next 30 miles, hoping things would turn around, but they never really did. So I ended up, calling it a mile 54. Yeah, I was at 54 on the race course, but it was at the 50-mile finish line. But I think it was still valuable to do the part of the race that I did. And I learned a lot about it's like, okay, if I am a little bit sick, I need to kind of throw my time goals out the window and just try to get through the race if that's my main goal, which is not what I did. I just went out at my ambitious goal pace, which was, probably not the smartest plan. So it's like, I learned how these things, so I think I learned a lot of things about what I need and what I respond to in different conditions. And I had kind of a skeleton crew out at the race. It was just my partner who was also taking care of the 2-year-old for the daytime. And then I was having a friend that was gonna show up at night, but we didn't really have the logistics from her to actually pace me. She was just gonna crew me. So I didn't have any pacer lined up, and but I just figured it's like, oh yeah, I've done like, I did Kettle Moraine last year. That was, hillier, like a harder course. Like I'll be fine at this flat one, right? But yeah, definitely underestimated how difficult of even, a flat course can be in different ways than a hilly course is. So just I wasn't quite, like, my mental game wasn't right on, my physical game wasn't quite on, and it just, yeah, didn't work out. But it was, I think I learned some things I wouldn't have otherwise if I was just like, oh yeah, I'm sick, so I'm not gonna start this race.
Wow, so many good things in this conversation. I want to back up just a second. We're talking about, plotting out races and thinking about A races and B races, and thinking about whether we're going to use races as, some training races, whether, that's in your personality. Like Reese, I can't step on a start line without racing. So I know I can't use that as a training run. That would be a bad decision for me. And, thinking about all of those pieces and your end goal, and then also thinking about, we put a lot of stake into some of these races if we only race a couple times a year. So it can be really hard to get past it if that was like your second race of the year and it didn't work out for you, or you got sick or whatever. I think these are important things, and it's a really good time of the year to start talking about it, because, right, I have a lot of athletes right now that are kind of rolling into transition season, just coming off races. We're starting to think about 2024, 2025 races, and planning those. Do you have any, thing to add for advice for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, like, so what you mentioned, like knowing the type of athlete you are. And I actually would mention that even though some of my races are like just B races, whenever I get started, I do still push myself. So I have to make sure, like, yeah, I should probably not do like a 50-mile, like really close to 100-mile or something. Actually, I did the Ely Marathon this year, and 2 weeks from Hennepin, and even that, and I was just like, okay, I didn't race that completely all out, but I probably did go a little harder than I should have, given it was only 2 weeks ago. I don't think that made or broke anything, but in the future I probably wouldn't do that, or I just do the half marathon or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, yeah, knowing what your tendencies are, and given that, like, do you like to race a lot, but also can you hold back in races? Those are two separate questions. Because some people really do, and I admire this, like literally just like can do a race and like not feel that competitive urge. I actually can't do that.
I'm jealous of people that can do that.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
I really can't do that. So so I have to make sure they're not like too stacked up on top of each other. But still having, a build up 50K every few weeks or so seems to work out all right.
Right, nice. And the other thing that you mentioned that kind of stuck with me is, and I've heard this before, like flat hundreds are easy. Well, they're not. They're just a different beast, right? And so
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that, because you have done, some more technical races, some mountain races, some road races, all the above. And is there anything that you would have done differently in preparing for the flat course? Because it is a big difference, I think, in the taxing of your body using those same muscles over and over for many miles. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how you would support an athlete?
Yeah, I think the mistake that I made in training was like not really practicing my like walk run intervals all that much. Because a lot of that had to do with like limited time, right? Because I wasn't really sure I didn't think my daughter, who's would really tolerate doing a long run in the stroller with me. She doesn't want to sit in the stroller that long, so I'd be trying to like fit in my long runs before she got up, or at least before most of the day's over, to have time with my family. And so I was, I'll do them at like 8 or 9 minute miles and not do the walking intervals, right? So but then when it came to then race day, it's like I was, doing the walk run intervals, but were still at a pace that was, especially that day, given I was sick, like not sustainable, clearly. And maybe if I had, practiced more and like really had a good feel for the actual rhythm I'll go in the 100-mile distance, that may have worked out a little bit better. But yeah, it came down to time for me. So I think in the future, I just need to find a way. It's like, okay, I'm going to be out here for 4 hours doing, walk run intervals, like just fit that in somewhere.
And I love that you say that, because first of all, it's great that you're being transparent, because I think as coaches, we learn so much running races ourselves and having experiences and reflecting. And also, I also learned through the eyes of my athletes that I can take forward and use with other athletes. And I love that. That's the conversation I have a lot, is about if you're using that walk run, strategy in your race, we have to be practicing that. We have to be working on some race specific practice so that you're ready for that to happen on race day, both physically and mentally, because especially when you're doing a lot of races like marathons and under, you're not doing that probably. Some people are, not everyone, but I'm speaking for you specifically. You're probably running the entire thing. So it's a whole different mindset when we go into a race and we have to walk. So we want to know that it's our plan. It's not because we're walking because we have to, we're walking because that's the plan that we went in with that day.
Yeah, exactly. And also being able to adjust the plan. It's like, well, it's like maybe I'm a little sick of the starting line. So instead of doing 7 3s, I'm going to do like 5 5s or something, at least for the first part, and make sure I'm okay. Right. So yeah. And that's, I think, just, an experience that you have to kind of think about. And the other thing I thought too, with Hennepin and the challenge of a flat course, like I think it's just a lot more mentally challenging. I mean, the scenery at Hennepin is actually like beautiful, and there's like cool stuff to look at, but I think so it's like when you're kind of struggling in like a hilly or technical 100, you can be like, oh yeah, it's like, well, I'm walking this because it's uphill, or like I'm walking this section because it's technical, but when you're walking for an extended period of time and it's just like totally flat, like for me, it just made me feel like it's like, oh, the only reason I'm walking this is because I literally can't run right now.
Right.
So it's like you can kind of fool in like other races, you can kind of other terrain, you kind of fool yourself and be like, oh yeah, I'm just walking because it's technical or whatever. But
yeah,
it really kind of shows like your raw, I guess, physical state a little more easily. And it's like, I'm really not feeling great right now.
The other thing I like that you mentioned is that going in, you weren't feeling, 100%, but you still was trying to go for your A goal. I think we all can fool ourselves thinking I'll be fine, I can get through this,
Yeah.
So I like that you have reflected on that. But, Reese and I talk a lot about, having adaptability in these races and making a switch of gears, right? And it sounds like, you realized it maybe a little later than you would have liked to. But do you want to talk a little bit about that and how you would help an athlete with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is like so individual too, like, how people's bodies respond to, having a virus and like your immune system and like all these things. So like what happened to me, like may not be the same as what happens to someone else with the similar circumstance. But yeah, I think just maintaining that adaptive mindset, and also thinking about like, so what's your like big goals before the race and how can you set yourself up for success there? So is your most important goal to get a certain time, or is it to finish the race, right? And like either way, it's fine, right? But just having those in the back of your mind, like, do you want to finish the race still, even if you're not getting anywhere near your goal time? Kind of thinking through those things in advance, I think, is really important for an athlete, and probably not something I did enough. Clearly not something I did enough before this race. So yeah, just thinking through like, what are your goals and why, if it's to get this time, why? If it's to finish the race, why? And, really thinking about your why. And yeah, my life was pretty chaotic in general leading up to this race. There was a lot of personal and work things going on, and it was just, general chaos there too. So not really, that was not something I could control, but,
Right.
you have to keep that in mind, if you're lining up for 100, it kind of takes all of your physical and emotional reserves. And so if both aren't topped off, then you probably need to think about adjusting your plan.
Yeah. Good wisdom there.
Is there anything that you do just, like studying psychology? I know you said developmental psychology, but is there anything that you do to ensure your like mental health or your mental like adaptability? Is there any like brain games or anything you think about on the run, visualizations? What kind of strategies do you use to keep your mind in the game?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I like to just, I try to think of the race in segments, right? Like, so I think, a great strategy is like, getting to the next aid station, getting to the next 10-mile marker. And just kind of when I'm feeling in a bad state, it's like, okay, I'm gonna like mostly walk, but then I'm gonna like every time my watch beeps a mile, I'll try to like jog to like some like landmark I could see, something like that, to keep engaged in that way. And yeah, I know like some people do visualization and stuff. I probably should do more of that, and maybe that'll be part of my plan for the next one. But I know there's lots of, psychologically, that's not really my area of psychology that I specialize in, but I know there's lots of psychologically proven things you can do that'll help set you up for success on race day. When I was feeling, not good for a very prolonged period of time at Hennepin, like I do know that, things can turn around at some point. And I kind of, the mental state where I was out there, I gave it 30 miles to turn around, and they didn't. And so that I just, at the end, I think my mental reserve just kind of got used up at that point. And that, it was what it was.
What's that one of the like more challenging races you've done in recent, or what would you say was the most challenging in the past couple of years?
Oh man, I feel like it's different, but like physically versus mentally challenging. So certainly Hennepin is probably the most mentally challenging one that I can remember, just because my body wasn't cooperating with me, and the course kind of lays you raw. It's like, you could certainly run this if your body was working, but clearly it's not, which is, why you're having to walk most of it. So that, the mental challenge had been, I think, physically challenging. That's a good question. I know like I did the Never Summer 100K in I don't know what year. I think it was like 2019, maybe the year before COVID. And that was I had a very different mindset going into that one, which I think sometimes serves me better, like a complete beginner's mindset. It's like, I am not, like, my training really hadn't gone very well for that race. And it's in the mountains, it's up high at altitude. So I hadn't, done altitude training. I also hadn't even done much regular training because I kept spraining my ankle that summer. But I think that was like back when you would like lose all your Western States tickets if you didn't like do a race every year. And so I was like, I have to like get through this race, or else I think I only had one other ticket at the time, so I don't know why I was so concerned about it. Pre-kids, I guess you worry more about other things. But so like my body wasn't really very prepared for the race, so it's kind of ridiculous that I did as well as I did. But for whatever reason, like my nutrition just worked out great that day, and I didn't have any issues there, and no issues with the altitude. If anything, maybe the altitude like slowed me down, so I couldn't run too hard in the beginning. It was kind of a weird day. I was extremely sore afterwards though. Like I tried to go on So like I didn't like feel very physically bad during the race. So there's also like storms and all this stuff, but like the next day after, like I could hardly walk. We tried to like do a hike and I had to like get Carrie like piggyback down a hill, and it was kind of ridiculous.
And I love and just about like the more tough races, because I think it like, brings us coaches down to like just the athlete level. I feel like when people hear the word coach, they're like, oh my gosh, they're going to expect so much out of me because their training is perfect and because their racing is perfect and because they always hit their goals and stuff like that. And it's like, well, with athletics, like whether, like you're coaching, whether you're an athlete, like you try to line up and you try to stack all of these principles and training theory and the art of coaching like an individual together to get a good performance. And, like it doesn't always work out that way. And I guess that leads of like, when you're feeling so terrible, like how do you recover from a race?
Yeah, well, yeah, so yeah, it helped me. Like I wrote about the race a little bit in a blog and reflected on it a bit, so that helped. And there's some aspect of like forgiving myself, because like there's probably ways I could have like kept going and made it under the cutoff, but I chose not to. And so kind of like not forgiving myself, it's not like I did something bad, but like understanding where I was at and why that decision was made, and just giving myself grace for that has helped me recover mentally. The physical recovery has been like, overall I didn't feel like too sore after the race, but then I like did try to go on a trail run probably too soon after and got some tendonitis. So now I'm working on recovering from some tendonitis in my foot, so just trying to kind of slowly build back my mileage and go into physical therapy and all that stuff, and trying to think about definitely thinking a lot about what my 2024 race plan will look like. So I'm already signed up for the Bandera 100K, which is really not that far off, so it's another goal to look towards. I like having having another thing that you're gonna target, I think, especially if you have a race that didn't go your way, is nice. Maybe not like right after, because you need some recovery time still, but a few months ahead is something good to look forward to.
Yeah, I think that's pretty important too, because like I know like personally for me, like if I have a bad result or a result that I'm not too like, happy with or whatever, the urge to want to like go back out right away and get some sort of redemption, especially like before the year ends or before you take an extended period. That urge is real. And I know some other athletes that I coach that, like they like something doesn't go their way and it's like, okay, so like maybe I don't want to race this other 100 miler before the end of the year, but like I made it like 70 miles out of 100 mile. And now like in a month and a half, like I want to try to race like another hard 50. And it's like, are we just like looking for redemption? Like maybe we need some grace and some recovery, because even after, making it 70 or 80 miles or 60 miles in a 100-mile race, like it's still 60 miles, 70 miles of fatigue on your body, even if you don't finish.
Mm-hmm. And the chronic fatigue of training for it too, right? Like
yeah. So I love that. But well, wonderful. Like, is there anything else about your coaching, like philosophy, your practice that you want to mention for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, just like most coach, well, I'm very nerdy about like science and training principles too and stuff. So if people are into that, like, I'd love to nerd out with athletes about that sort of thing. And just, yeah, I think like ultra running is cool, like just all the variables that go into it. And, even if you do this program and you follow these things, you just never know what's going to happen on race day, which is fun. But I also like you mentioned before, I run a lot of different distances and a lot of different terrain. And I think sometimes people kind of categorize themselves like, oh, I'm this type of runner, and I can't do this other stuff, which is fine if like that's what you like doing the most. There's nothing wrong with specializing in a certain type of thing, but I think sometimes people kind of put themselves into a box. And it's like, if you want to, it's like, yeah, if you've been like mostly doing like road stuff, but you want to do this super, technical trail run, you go for it, right? We can work on that. Or if the opposite, if you've done mostly really hilly trail runs and you want to do some road marathon, we can go for that too. It's like, it is very different, but it's all running. And like, it's just maybe like 20% of the training is different, but the rest of it is all just running and building up your aerobic endurance for the most part.
Wonderful. Well, Loretta, do you have any other questions for Madeline?
I think I'm good. I do just want to mention that Coach Madeline is accepting athletes right now. She has a nice web page that you can check out on our trailrun.coach. And if you're interested in working with Coach Madeline, shoot me an email, loretta.ornerymule@gmail.com, and I'll get you hooked up. So thanks a lot for coming, Madeline. It was nice to have you on the show.
Yeah, nice to chat with you both.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. It was great meeting you and great getting to know your racing philosophy and just get a glimpse of your personal background and whatnot. So for any athletes out there looking for a grade A coach, Madeline is awesome. So thank you so much for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you.